in a grand mansion filled with elegant furniture and sparkling chandeliers. Edward, a wealthy businessman, paced anxiously in the nursery, his heart heavy with worry. His young son, Lucas, a bright-eyed boy of 5, had been born deaf. And despite Edward hiring the best doctors, therapists, and using the most advanced technology, nothing seemed to help. Edward's hands trembled as he watched Lucas stare at him silently, his tiny face a mixture of curiosity and frustration. And for the first time, Edward felt powerless in a world where money could not buy miracles. His wife, Catherine, sat quietly in a corner, brushing a strand of hair from Lucas's forehead, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, mourning the fact that their son could not hear the sounds that made life so vibrant. The tension in the mansion grew heavier with every day that passed, until Edward decided to take Lucas to the nearby park, hoping fresh air and nature might lift his son's spirits, even if just a little. The park was lively with the laughter of children and the cheerful songs of birds. Yet Lucas remained quiet, staring at the fluttering leaves as if trying to understand a world that felt distant and unreachable. Edward's mind was clouded with worry. But then something caught his eye: a small boy sitting alone on a worn wooden bench near the fountain. The boy looked rough and unkempt, clearly homeless, with ragged clothes and bare feet. Yet, he held a small, battered flute to his lips and began to play. The tune was soft, simple, and a little off-key, but there was something magical about it. Lucas's eyes widened, and for the first time that day, a faint smile appeared on his face. He tilted his head as though trying to listen, leaning slightly closer to the boy who seemed so out of place in the manicured park. Edward froze, his heart skipping a beat, feeling an unusual mix of curiosity and disbelief. He watched as Lucas's tiny hands reached out instinctively, moving in rhythm with the music, almost as if he understood it in a way no one else had seen. Edward felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about this homeless boy, Malik, seemed different. His music had awakened something in Lucas that no machine, doctor, or therapy had ever achieved. Questions flooded Edward's mind. Who was this boy? How could someone so young and so poor make such an impact on his son? Edward's pulse quickened with hope and suspense. There was a strange, unspoken energy between Lucas and Malik, something powerful and almost impossible to explain. Edward knew in that moment that Malik might hold a key to something no one in the mansion had ever dared to imagine, a chance for his son to finally hear the world around him. With a mixture of caution and hope, Edward approached the boy, not knowing that this single encounter would set in motion a journey that could change all their lives forever. Edward took a deep breath, trying to steady the rush of emotions that swirled inside him as he stepped closer to the small boy sitting on the worn park bench. Malik's eyes, sharp and cautious, followed every move Edward made, and for a moment, the air seemed to thicken with tension. Edward knelt slightly, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm, and offered the boy a small bag of food, along with a simple toy car, hoping to bridge the gap between their worlds. Malik hesitated, his fingers brushing the items nervously, but he did not push them away. There was a wariness in his eyes that told Edward this boy had faced too many dangers and disappointments to trust as. Yet, as Malik glanced at Lucas, the young boy who had never heard a sound in his life, something shifted. Lucas, sitting on the soft grass beside his father, clapped his hands and giggled at the tunes Malik had been playing, his tiny body bouncing with delight. Malik's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, surprised by the effect he had on the millionaire's son. Edward's heart tightened with hope. He watched carefully as Lucas began to respond in new ways, stretching his hands toward Malik, attempting to mimic the boy's gestures, and laughing in a rhythm that matched Malik's music. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to Edward, it was nothing short of miraculous. This was the spark of life, of connection, of something deeper than sound, that no doctor or specialist had been able to ignite. Edward realized that this small, homeless boy, rough, unpolished, and completely unexpected, was doing something extraordinary. He took a moment to gather his courage, then spoke gently to Malik, inviting him to visit the mansion. The offer hung in the air like a fragile promise, a bridge between two very different worlds. Malik's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise, doubt, and curiosity swirling in them. He had never been invited into a home like this, let alone one that gleamed with wealth and comfort. The idea felt strange, almost unbelievable. And yet there was something about Lucas' joyful response that tugged at his heart. He studied Edward carefully, reading the sincerity in his voice, the urgency in his gaze, and slowly, almost cautiously, Malik nodded. There was a silent understanding between them, a recognition that this was an opportunity to do something meaningful, perhaps even life-changing. Edward felt a surge of relief mixed with anticipation. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but he sensed that Malik's presence could bring light to Lucas' silent world in a way that no doctor, no machine, and no amount of money ever could. As Malik picked up his small flute and began to play once more, Lucas leaned closer, eyes shining with excitement, and Edward watched, his heart pounding, knowing that this unexpected connection had set in motion a story that could change all their lives forever. The next day Malik arrived at the mansion, carrying his worn flute and a small notebook filled with sketches and scribbles from his life on the streets. And Edward watched with a mix of curiosity and hope as his young son, Lucas, ran toward the boy with a hesitant smile. Malik, still cautious, followed Lucas into the sunlit nursery, where toys and soft rugs filled the room. A world completely different from the rough streets he had always known. He began to play his flute softly, the notes weaving through the air like gentle whispers, and Lucas immediately responded, clapping his tiny hands in rhythm, bouncing with joy as if he had finally discovered a new language. Edward stood nearby, hardly daring to breathe, amazed at how quickly Lucas began to mimic sounds, trying to hum along, and even tapping the floor and furniture to match the beats Malik created. It was as if the music was unlocking something inside Lucas, something that no doctor, no therapy, and no machine had been able to touch. Malik then introduced another form of learning, using simple hand gestures and movements alongside his music, showing Lucas how to connect rhythm and expression. Lucas watched intently, his eyes wide and sparkling with curiosity, following Malik's hands as they moved through the air, then trying to copy them with a focus and determination that left Edward speechless. The mansion, once quiet and filled with tension, now hummed with life and energy, the sounds of claps, giggles, and music mingling in a way that seemed almost magical. As the days passed, Malik shared small stories about his life on the streets, describing the people he had met, the struggles he had faced, and the little joys he had found in simple moments. Lucas listened in his own way, nodding, laughing, and sometimes pointing or touching objects to show he understood, creating a silent conversation between them that was full of meaning. Edward observed this growing bond with awe, realizing that human connection could transcend spoken words, that a heart open to love and patience could reach even a child who had lived in silence all his life. The more time Lucas spent with Malik, the more he seemed to come alive, his world expanding in ways that no textbook or expensive therapy could achieve. Malik's presence brought not just sound but emotion into Lucas's life, and Edward felt a wave of gratitude and wonder wash over him, knowing that this boy, who had nothing in material wealth, was giving Lucas the most valuable gift he could ever receive. Each day ended with new discoveries, small victories, and a sense of hope that had been missing from the mansion for so long. And Edward could see the miracle unfolding before his eyes, realizing that sometimes the most extraordinary lessons come not from books or doctors, but from the simple, powerful connections between human hearts. In that room, filled with laughter, music, and gentle encouragement, it became clear that Malik and Lucas were teaching each other something far beyond sound, the meaning of trust, patience, and the extraordinary power of love. One quiet evening, the mansion felt unusually still, as if it were holding its breath, and in the soft glow of the nursery's lamps, Malik sat cross-legged on the floor with his small, worn instrument, carefully plucking out a simple melody that drifted gently through the room. Lucas sat nearby, his little hands resting on the rug, his eyes wide and shining with focus as he listened, completely absorbed by the sounds. Edward stood just behind Malik, leaning against the wall, his heart pounding with anticipation, unsure if anything remarkable would happen tonight, yet secretly hoping for a sign of progress. As the notes floated in the air, something miraculous occurred. Lucas opened his mouth and vocalized a faint, trembling sound, almost like a whisper carried on the melody. Malik froze, his fingers stilling on the instrument, and Edward's eyes widened in disbelief as their gazes met, both silently acknowledging the impossible Lucas was trying to speak. The air seemed to shimmer with excitement and wonder, and even the shadows on the walls felt alive with possibility. Over the next several days, Malik devoted himself entirely to guiding Lucas, using a careful combination of rhythm, music, and hand gestures, each day pushing gently, yet patiently, encouraging Lucas to explore the world of sound in a way that was playful, natural, and full of love. Edward watched in awe as Lucas began to experiment with new sounds, his tiny voice growing stronger and clearer with each attempt, while laughter and joy echoed through the once silent mansion, transforming it into a place of hope and warmth. Catherine, who had watched from the sidelines for so long, skeptical and unsure if any real progress was possible, quietly entered the room one afternoon, her heart heavy yet cautiously expectant, and she froze when she heard Lucas speak his very first word, "Mama?" Tears sprang to her eyes, streaming freely down her cheeks as she sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a mixture of disbelief, relief, and uncontainable joy. Edward moved to her side, holding both of them as Lucas clapped his hands in delight, his laughter ringing through the room like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. Malik, sitting nearby, smiled softly, his own eyes glistening, knowing that he had been part of something truly extraordinary, something that no wealth, no technology, and no doctor could have achieved alone. The family, once trapped in silence and uncertainty, now experienced a breakthrough that filled every corner of their home with life and emotion. And Edward realized that this small boy, who had so little in the world, had given them the greatest gift imaginable, the ability to hear, to speak, and to connect with each other in a way they had only dreamed of. That night, as the mansion settled into a peaceful quiet, the echoes of Lucas's first words lingered, a powerful reminder that patience, love, and human connection could overcome even the greatest obstacles, and that miracles often appear in the most unexpected forms. Word of the remarkable bond between Lucas, the millionaire's young son, and Malik, the small homeless boy who had brought music and sound into his silent world, began to spread slowly at first, reaching friends, neighbors, and eventually some of Edward's colleagues. And with it came a wave of skepticism and judgment that hung over the mansion like a shadow. People whispered, questioning why a wealthy family would allow a street child into their home, doubting that someone so poor and uneducated could have any meaningful influence over a boy who had never heard a sound. Edward faced these doubts with a mix of frustration and quiet determination, listening politely to his friends and staff's criticisms, while secretly knowing that Malik's patient guidance had achieved what the world had declared impossible. Despite the murmurs and the raised eyebrows, Malik remained focused, undeterred by the whispers or the stares, returning each day to play his music, to teach with gentle hand gestures, and to share small stories from his life, never losing sight of the progress Lucas had made. Slowly, Edward began to see a shift within himself as well. He realized that he had been clinging too tightly to logic and wealth, forgetting that human connection, love, and patience could be far more powerful than any technology or professional method. Watching Lucas's laughter, listening to his budding words, and seeing the boy's excitement each time Malik entered the room, Edward felt his doubts dissolve, replaced by trust in unconventional methods and the simple truth that compassion and perseverance could change lives in ways no one could predict. Even Catherine, who had been cautious at first, began to notice the subtle changes in the household, the walls between privilege and poverty, between judgment and understanding, slowly crumbling as Malik's presence brought warmth, joy, and unity to a family that had once been divided by fear and uncertainty. The mansion, once quiet and formal, began to hum with life and shared moments. From Lucas' playful attempts at speech to Malik's patient lessons and laughter, over time, Malik became more than just a visitor or a temporary helper. He became a trusted friend, a mentor, and ultimately, a member of the family. Edward invited him to share meals, join family activities, and even take part in simple decisions, recognizing that Malik's presence had brought something far more valuable than wealth or education into their lives, a sense of humanity, connection, and love that transcended social classes and shattered old prejudices. The bond between Lucas and Malik, initially questioned by outsiders, now stood as proof that miracles could happen in unexpected ways, that trust and compassion could overcome doubt and judgment, and that the power of the human heart could break down walls that money and status had built. In the quiet moments of the mansion, as Lucas played and laughed with Malik nearby, Edward watched in awe, realizing that sometimes the greatest lessons in life do not come from the world outside, but from opening one's home and heart to someone who the world has forgotten, someone who, against all odds, can teach the most profound lessons about love, patience, and family. Months passed, and the mansion that had once echoed with silence and tension now thrummed with a warmth and liveliness that no one could have imagined. As Lucas, the young boy who had been born deaf, began forming clear words and simple sentences, his small voice growing stronger and more confident with every passing day. And sometimes, to the amazement of Edward and Catherine, he even laughed aloud, a sound so pure and joyful that it filled every corner of the grand home, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for it. Each morning, Lucas would rush to Malik, eager for the lessons that had become the highlight of his day, and Malik, with a patience honed from years of struggle and survival, guided him with music, rhythm, and gentle encouragement, celebrating each new sound and helping Lucas link words to feelings in a way that was playful yet transformative. Edward watched in awe, often unable to contain his emotions, realizing that no amount of wealth, no machine, no team of the world's most skilled specialists could have achieved what Malik's empathy, persistence, and unique approach had accomplished. The boy who had nothing but courage and heart had given Lucas a world full of sound, laughter, and possibility. The mansion itself seemed to breathe with this new energy. The sterile, quiet rooms that once held only therapy equipment and sterile attempts at teaching were now alive with music, giggles, and conversation, and the household felt more like a true home than it ever had before. Malik, who had spent most of his life wandering the streets, feeling invisible and forgotten, experienced something he had never known: a sense of belonging, pride, and purpose. He could see the tangible results of his care and patience in Lucas's eyes, in the boy's excitement when he spoke a new word, and in the way Edward and Catherine looked at him with gratitude and respect that went far beyond anything he had imagined possible. Slowly, the barriers between the two very different worlds, the wealthy mansion and the boy's rough past, disappeared as the family embraced Malik, not as a guest, but as one of their own. Every evening, the three of them would sit together, Lucas babbling and forming new words, Malik humming tunes, and Edward and Catherine watching, tears of joy glistening in their eyes, realizing that the impossible had truly become real. A boy who had never heard could now experience the full rich sound of life, laughter, and love, and it was all because someone had dared to care, to believe, and to connect in ways that defied expectations. In that mansion, a miracle unfolded not through money, technology, or fame, but through patience, empathy, and the human heart's incredible capacity to transform life. The story of Lucas and Malik became a testament to the idea that true change does not come from privilege alone, but from courage, compassion, and the willingness to reach across differences. And as Edward looked at the smiling faces of his son and Malik, he realized that sometimes the smallest gestures of love could create the most extraordinary miracles, forever changing the course of lives that had once seemed limited by silence and doubt. After witnessing the incredible transformation in Lucas's life, Edward made a decision that would change the course of both boys' futures forever. He chose to formally adopt Malik, offering him not only a home within the mansion's grand walls, but also access to education, opportunities, and most importantly, the love and care he had never known. The moment Edward shared this decision with Catherine, her eyes welled up with tears of joy, and together they began preparing to welcome Malik fully into their family, understanding that this boy, once invisible to the world, had become an irreplaceable part of their lives. Word of the adoption spread quickly through the community, capturing the hearts of everyone who heard the story of a millionaire's son and a homeless boy, whose courage, talent, and unwavering kindness had achieved what many thought impossible, bringing sound, laughter, and joy into a life that had been trapped in silence. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers were touched by the tale, amazed at how a small act of patience and empathy could ripple outward, transforming not just one life, but the lives of an entire family and community. Meanwhile, Lucas continued to flourish, exploring the world with a newfound confidence, speaking clearly, laughing freely, and showing an emotional depth that astonished everyone around him. Malik, for his part, adjusted to his new life with quiet strength, feeling for the first time a sense of belonging, security, and pride that he had never imagined possible. He reveled in his growing bond with Lucas, teaching him new songs, sharing stories, and guiding him as he continued to develop his voice and understanding of the world. Edward and Catherine watched all of this with admiration and gratitude, recognizing that Malik's courage, resilience, and heart had not only transformed their son's life, but had also touched them deeply, reminding them of the extraordinary power of kindness and human connection. Even the staff and household members, initially skeptical of Malik's place in the mansion, began to see him as an irreplaceable part of the family, his presence bringing warmth, joy, and inspiration to all. The mansion, once silent and formal, was now filled with laughter, music, and shared experiences, a living testament to what can happen when trust and compassion overcome fear and doubt. Malik's story, from the streets to the mansion, became a symbol of hope for many, demonstrating that no matter how small or overlooked a person may seem, their heart and determination can make a lasting impact on the lives of others. Edward often reflected on the journey that had brought Malik to them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude that the boy who had once been alone and unseen had entered their lives and taught them lessons money and power never could. In embracing Malik fully, Edward, Catherine, and Lucas not only changed his life, but also created a living example of how courage, empathy, and love can bridge worlds, erase prejudice, and inspire everyone fortunate enough to witness such a powerful human story unfold. Years later, the mansion that had once been silent and tense now hummed with the lively energy of a family transformed. As Lucas, the once deaf boy, had grown into a confident, compassionate young man, his voice clear, his laughter full of warmth, and his heart filled with gratitude for the boy who had changed his life. Lucas often reflected on the patience and guidance Malik had given him, realizing that every small melody, gesture, And story had taught him more than just words and sounds. It had shown him how to feel, connect, and trust in the goodness of others. Edward and Catherine, moved by the profound impact Malik had made on their son, decided to honor this extraordinary bond by creating a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged children with disabilities, a place where love, patience, and understanding could be as powerful as any treatment or technology. The foundation became a symbol of hope in the community, inspired by a story that reminded people that miracles are not bought with wealth, but created with empathy and human connection. Malik, now a young man with a bright future, devoted himself to music therapy, traveling to schools, hospitals, and centers where children like Lucas struggled in silence, using the same combination of rhythm, sound, and heart that had worked so beautifully with Lucas. And watching the joy in the eyes of these children reminded him of the first day he had met Lucas in the park. The young man, once homeless and alone, had found purpose and belonging, proving that one person's courage and kindness could spark life-changing transformations in the lives of others. In the evenings, Lucas would often sit with Malik and Edward, the three of them sharing stories, laughter, and music, the bonds between them stronger than ever, each realizing in their own way that love, patience, and compassion had far more power than money, status, or material gifts. Edward sometimes marveled at how a small homeless boy had brought so much light into their lives, turning despair into hope and silence into sound. And he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, knowing that Lucas' journey had inspired others too. Believe in the extraordinary potential within every human heart. Catherine, watching the two young men together, often found herself overcome with emotion, seeing not just what they had achieved, but the legacy of love and compassion that had grown from a single act of patience and connection. The story of Lucas, Malik, and Edward became a timeless reminder that true miracles are born when hearts meet and nurture one another, transcending wealth, social class, and circumstance, showing the world that the smallest gestures of care and understanding can create ripples that last a lifetime. In the quiet moments, as Lucas strummed a guitar beside Malik, and Edward listened with pride, the mansion seemed to shine, not because of its luxury, but because of the love and human connection that filled every corner, a living testament to the truth that when hearts are open, when patience and kindness guide actions, the impossible becomes real, and lives can be changed forever in ways that no money or power could ever achieve.